Violet Rivers moved quietly through the glittering ballroom, her plain uniform a stark contrast to the swirls of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos around her. The grand chandeliers above cast sparkling light on the polished marble floor, and delicate silk drapes framed the windows, glimpses of the city skyline twinkling beyond. She kept her gaze low, minding her tasks with practiced efficiency, clearing glasses from an ornate table here, discreetly replacing silverware there. The billionaire's birthday banquet was a glittering affair, full of the city's elite, laughing and exchanging pleasantries she wasn't meant to hear. As Violet worked, her presence barely registered. A waiter, his nose tilted high, sneered at the scuffed edges of her shoes. A nearby socialite whispered too loudly about her accent, assuming she wouldn't understand the polished chatter of investment deals and high society gossip. Violet bit her lip, stepping around a clumsy guest, careful not to draw more attention. She was just a background player here, a busser, responsible for clearing crumbs and empty plates. The music swelled, and the clinking of glasses layered over soft chatter, the atmosphere alive with celebration. Crystal flutes sparkled in candlelight on tables beneath towering floral arrangements. Until a sudden flare of orange caught her eye, a flash of movement near the raised dais. Her heart jolted as the open flame from an elaborately crafted candelabra leapt onto the pale silk dress of a famous socialite seated too close. The fabric caught fire instantly, the woman gasping and flailing as panic rippled through the crowd. Screams erupted around Violet, the sharp scent of smoke slicing through the perfume and champagne. The room froze in chaos as the fire threatened to spread in the cramped space. The chaotic energy in the ballroom was thick enough to choke on. Guests who had moments ago clinked glasses and exchanged polished smiles now froze, their eyes wide with fear as the fire threatened not just the woman in the silk dress but the entire gathering. The luxury of the space, the crystal chandeliers, the rich wood paneling, the immense floral arrangements, felt fragile beneath the sudden threat. Amid the disarray, no one stepped up with purposeful resolve. Some reached blindly for fire extinguishers, pausing in hesitation as their hands trembled. Others shouted, but their voices clashed into a disorganized roar. Security guards exchanged uncertain looks, unsure which direction to take. Violet Rivers moved with a clarity that the panic around her lacked. As the flames licked hungrily at the silk dress, she pushed through the crowd to the woman's side. Her voice rang out over the cacophony, steady, urgent. "Step back. Let me through." She moved with decisive speed, her hands quick to pull off her dark navy jacket, worn at the elbows but clean. Without hesitation, she wrapped it tightly around the fiery fabric. The silk hissed and writhed under the jacket's pressure as Violet pressed down with methodical, unyielding force. The socialite spasmed, panic twisting her limbs as the heat seared at her skin. Violet tightened her grip, murmuring, "Hold still. You're safe." The woman's frantic movements slowed, confusion relieved by the firm calm in Violet's tone. Nearby, a waiter, frozen moments before, snapped into motion. Violet pointed sharply. "Bring wet towels and buckets of water, now." Seconds later, a cluster of towels soaked through with water arrived. Violet used them to pat out the remaining sparks and smudges of flame stubbornly clinging to the gown. The smoke began to thin, replaced by the acrid smell of singed fabric and charred wood. Around her, chaos simmered but did not collapse further. Violet turned her gaze to the crowd, noting the anxious faces with care. "Clear a path to the main exit." Calmly, "No running," she commanded, her tone cold steel beneath urgency. A burly older man, formerly frozen in shock, grunted and began moving guests aside to make way. Violet caught sight of a small child clutching a woman's skirt, shaking and wide-eyed. She knelt, offering a gentle smile. "It's all right. Stay close and hold my hand." The child hesitated, trust blossoming slowly in her gaze. Violet took her hand and guided her to safety. More staff scrambled to action, some cautious, others bewildered. The fire extinguishers were locked behind glass across the room, and security sought the keys. Violet tracked their searches with a sharp eye, frequently raising her voice to direct the flow of people and resources. "Someone call the fire department, now," she ordered, and a nearby server nodded, rushing to a phone. The giant double doors at the ballroom's entrance swung open under Violet's urging, allowing a rush of fresh air that stirred the heavy haze. The sudden breeze sucked the smoke upward, dissipating it from the breathing space of the guests. The heat dropped perceptibly. Violet continued to steady the socialite's steps, her hands firm beneath the other woman's trembling shoulders. Deep breaths. "Help is coming," Violet reassured her, scanning her face for injury, thankful to find no visible burns, just the stress leaving rings beneath her eyes. Guests around them whispered, their collective fear ebbing to a hum of cautious relief. Suddenly, the sound system crackled as the event organizer tried to take control, but his words were drowned in the residual murmurs and some sharp, frustrated commands from the emergency staff. Without missing a beat, Violet raised her voice again, cutting through the noise. "Move back from the tables. Clear this wing. Help us get this child to the safe zone." Her commands fell on ears suddenly eager to cooperate, perhaps shaken by her confidence and decisiveness. Two strong men, nearby and jolted from shock, took cues from Violet and helped support the socialite's arms so she wouldn't collapse. Violet guided them toward the fringe of the crowd, where paramedics just arrived, carrying oxygen masks and medical bags. A fire crew followed shortly, their boots heavy but sure on the gleaming floor. The professionals worked swiftly, checking the woman's respiratory condition, helping her inhale oxygen, soothing her gagging cough. Violet watched, the adrenaline in her veins easing into something akin to exhaustion. The danger was contained, the emergency unfolding into routine professionalism. The crowd, now safe but subdued, looked on with a strange combination of awe and disbelief. Whispers began to ripple through the remaining guests. "Did you see her?" asked one man, his voice tight but appreciative. "That woman, she saved her." Another nodded toward Violet as she stepped back into the periphery, quietly folding her jacket over her arm. The once mocking waiter, standing uncertainly nearby, muttered, "I didn't think she was capable of that." A hush fell over the room as the socialite, recovered enough to speak, fixed Violet with tear-brimmed eyes. You saved me. I didn't know who to turn to but you. Thank you." Violet's features relaxed just slightly, her smile fleeting but genuine. She didn't want the attention, not here, not now. But the weight of gratitude pressed on her chest, heavier than the humidity or the fear moments before. The fragile silk dress, now scorched and ruined, was the first symbol to fall, yet Violet's actions had ensured no greater damage, no loss of life, no tragedy. As emergency services led the wounded woman to safety and began managing the remaining guests, Violet returned to her tasks, retrieving fallen glasses, repositioning chairs, quietly tidying chaos into order. But something had shifted. No longer invisible, she felt the weight of 100 eyes lingering on her quiet figure, the whisper of respect threading through the once dismissive murmurs of the crowd. The banquet, once alive with laughter and glitter, now replayed in the guests' minds with a new narrative. The busser who dared to step forward, the woman whose swift courage silenced a room on the brink of disaster. The ballroom's cold air seemed to fade away as Violet nodded to the paramedics and stepped into the quieter hallway outside. For a moment, the adrenaline that surged through her veins began to ebb, leaving behind a quiet ache that stretched into memory. The fire looked manageable now, the socialite safe, and yet something inside Violet stirred, a brittle reminder of all the shifts she had worked before tonight, all the challenges she never spoke about. Her mind drifted back several years, to a different life, still fresh despite the miles between then and now. She remembered the bright fluorescent lights of the hospital's emergency room, the cold steel gleaming on stretchers and gurneys. Violet, younger and more confident, stood at the ready in her crisp paramedic uniform. She was there to save lives, her hands steady as she raised the stiff collar of an unconscious child. Voices barked orders around her, and she took each call with a practiced calm that belied her years. She recalled nights spent racing through city streets, sirens slicing through the darkness, adrenaline fueling every breath. One scene etched deeply into her mind, attending to a little boy caught in a car accident, his tiny hand curled weakly around hers as she steadied him through the panic and chaos. Later, when the doctors praised her quick thinking and the boy's parents thanked her tearfully, she felt a surge of purpose that made every sleepless night worthwhile. But the years that followed were less kind. A moment flashed of a brisk autumn evening, rain glossing the pavement, where a hurried call led to an accident on a slick intersection. Violet's ambulance was first on the scene, but the slippery road betrayed her footing. She slipped, twisting her ankle badly as she tried to lift a patient. The pain was sharp and immediate. She pressed on, but the injury worsened, and a month later she was grounded from fieldwork. From there, the slow unraveling began. Medical bills mounted, the nagging injury flared painfully whenever she stood for long. Single motherhood pressed heavily on her shoulders. She needed stable income, one that didn't demand running full speed into emergencies or walking hours on sore feet. Her heart ached, but she applied for every job to keep income flowing, a waitress, cleaner, then finally busser positions, including the one at the glittering events where the Billionaire's Banquet had become her latest assignment. There were moments when she craved the siren's wail and the rush of emergency calls, but she swallowed the yearning, telling herself this low-profile life was enough, for now. But life in these exclusive circles was a silent test of patience. The guests at the parties never noticed her, or if they did, it was to sneer at her threadbare shoes, the faint accent that gave away her working-class roots, or the way she hesitated just slightly to avoid eye contact. She learned not to take it personally, dissolving into the background as though she were a ghost sweeping forgotten crumbs from under a golden table. A flash returned of late nights hunched over textbooks, nursing her child as she balanced coursework with the chaotic demands of cleaning restaurants and serving tables. Her dreams of returning to medical work were shelved, postponed indefinitely, replaced by fleeting hope and quiet determination. Her strength remained, though unseen, like a well-kept secret beneath a worn apron. It was this quiet resilience that surfaced tonight. Her actions at the banquet had not just been reflex, they were remembered instincts, forged over years of training and hard experience. The paramedic in her, careful and confident, outweighed the invisible busser no one noticed. She was the sum of every lesson learned in trauma rooms, every drill run in artificial emergencies, every life saved and every heartbreak endured. But the night also held pain. As Violet's ankle throbbed through the memory, the reality that her injury halted her career sat heavily again. The loneliness inherent in her work now, alone, unrecognized, always on the periphery, was a cost she bore silently. Yet tonight, as she bent to collect a stray glass fallen in the chaos, the sting of invisibility cracked, cold and sharp. Somewhere in the crowd, eyes no longer slid past her, they lingered, uncertain, curious, respectful. The distance between the polished elite and her humble station seemed less insurmountable. Her past was not forgotten, it was just waiting for the moment to rise. She straightened up, wiping sweat from her forehead, feeling the familiar ache in her arms and legs. The memory faded, replaced by the weight of now. Blood pounded in her temples from the buzz of the room, but the fragile thread of the life she'd led, the past and present, held steady. Her gaze flickered to the ballroom doors where the emergency services continued their work. Tonight, she had acted as she always hoped to, without hesitation, without fear. And though the silk dress lay burned and shredded, untouched by the catastrophe it might have become, Violet quietly wondered if perhaps she was ready for something more than the shadows at the edge of these glittering parties. The warning aches in her ankle whispered caution, but her heart whispered louder. Tonight was not the end of her story. The next morning, the workroom behind the ballroom buzzed with a different kind of energy. Violet Rivers found herself sitting quietly at a crew table, clutching a simple paper cup of lukewarm coffee, but the atmosphere around her had shifted palpably. Her co-workers, those who had only yesterday barely nodded or avoided her gaze, now approached cautiously, their expressions uncertain but respectful. "Violet," came a tentative voice. It was Margot, the head waitress, who usually held herself with a superior air over the serving staff. Today, however, her tone softened. "I just wanted to say, what you did last night. It was incredible." Margot's eyes held a new respect. "You saved her. You saved a lot of people." Violet gave a small nod, still unsure how to take the sudden attention. "It was what needed to be done," she said simply, avoiding the praise. Other co-workers gathered around, their previous apathy erasing into admiration. "We should have helped sooner," muttered one young man who had been frozen in place during the fire. "You just stepped in and took control. Amazing." Word had traveled fast. Within hours, videos recorded by guests had appeared online, capturing the moment the silk dress caught fire, and more importantly, the busser with the navy jacket who became the unlikeliest hero of the night. Comments flooded social media, praising her calm under pressure, the quick instincts that saved a life. A news outlet even caught up with the socialite directly affected. In a heartfelt interview, the woman's voice trembled as she described how panic overcame her until Violet stepped forward. If it wasn't for her, things could have turned tragic. She was the only one who stayed calm. The clip quickly went viral, propelling Violet into an unexpected spotlight. At the same time, old photographs began circulating on local forums and social pages, images of Violet in her paramedic uniform, poised and confident, awards and accolades from her former hospital days. Anonymous posts shared positive reviews from supervisors and colleagues who remembered her dedication and skill. Her past life, once invisible in her current world, was suddenly a topic of interest. Within the workplace, the change was tangible. The waiter who had mocked her shoes approached with an apologetic smile, his prior disdain replaced by awkward admiration. "I'm sorry for what I said," he admitted quietly. "You handled yourself better than anyone else." Guests attending other events at the venue started to greet her by name, nodding with newfound respect. Where once she had moved among the crowd like a shadow, she was now invited into conversations sideways, no longer a mere fixture. The banquet's organizer, still dealing with the logistics of the incident's aftermath, approached her in private. "Ms. Rivers, the board wants to formally acknowledge your actions. Your presence and quick thinking prevented a disaster." They handed her a letter commending her bravery and professionalism, a recognition she had not expected. Despite the attention, Violet remained humble. She continued her duties quietly, the spotlight unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Each gesture of thanks, every whisper of respect, felt like bricks building a long overdue bridge between her modest present and the skills she had worked hard for. One evening, after a long day, a coworker slipped her a phone, a message from an old paramedic friend who had spotted the online videos. "You still have that fire," the text read simply. It was both encouragement and recognition. For Violet, the night's crisis had cracked open a door she thought firmly closed. The silence that had always wrapped around her was breaking apart, replaced by the hum of acknowledgement. A quiet hope began to pulse beneath the surface. Maybe this time, she wouldn't have to disappear into the background. As she rested her head briefly against the cool wall, she let herself imagine what might come next. 2 weeks after the banquet, Violet Rivers found herself sitting in a modest but bright office at the edge of town. The window looked out onto a small garden where early spring flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Across from her sat a middle-aged woman with crisp glasses and a kind but businesslike smile. "Violet, we've been following the news of your actions at the banquet," the woman began, sliding an envelope across the desk. "Your courage and professionalism are exactly what we seek. We have a position open for trainees in an elite paramedic recertification program. It's a rigorous course, designed to bring experienced professionals like yourself back to the field, or to leadership roles in emergency services." Violet's hands tightened around the envelope, a mix of emotions flaring inside her: hope, fear, doubt. For a moment, she said nothing. The woman continued gently, "We're also aware of your situation as a single mother, and we provide flexible scheduling and support. This could be the next step for you." Violet looked down at the letterhead. This was a genuine offer, not just polite words. She thought of the hospital halls, the sirens, the life-or-death moments she had yearned for all these years, and the nights she had spent exhausted after low-paying shifts that barely made ends meet. I need a moment," Violet finally said softly. The woman nodded, standing to give her space. Alone, Violet's mind raced. The fear of injury still lurked at the edges, her ankle ached sometimes, a reminder of the past that nearly derailed her career. Could she handle the physical demand again? Could she balance the intensity with motherhood, with the simple needs of her child waiting at home? She recalled the video clips, the messages of thanks from those she helped, the newfound respect from colleagues and strangers alike. It was a salve to years spent swallowed by invisibility. But stepping back into that world? That was a leap. The next days stretched into a whirlwind of conversations. She spoke with her child's school counselor and arranged for after-school care. She reached out to an old mentor in emergency medicine, who offered encouragement and advice. Slowly, the crack of uncertainty widened into a tentative path. At last, Violet accepted the offer. Her first morning at the recertification center was a mixture of nerves and determination. The building was modern and filled with light, equipped with classrooms where mannequins simulated patients, and instructors who spoke with the authority of deep experience. Violet donned a new uniform, crisp, dark blue, the insignia of the paramedic corps shining on her sleeve. The group included others like her, those returning after time away, those seeking to build new skills, and some younger recruits. The initial days were demanding, written exams testing knowledge that lay dormant, drills resuscitating and triaging with the precision she had once mastered. Physical training pushed her limits, her ankle protested, but the determination to reclaim her place drowned out the pain. Outside the classroom, her phone buzzed regularly with messages of support. Friends and colleagues from her past life sent reminders of her strength and worth. Videos of her banquet heroism were shared with instructors who applauded her calm under pressure and compassionate leadership. One evening, after a long day of simulation and review, Violet returned home, exhausted but glowing in a way she had not felt in years. Her child ran to greet her at the door, throwing arms around her in a fierce embrace. "I'm proud of you, Mom," the child whispered. Violet held the embrace, savoring the moment. For so long, she had hidden her skills, chosen humility over recognition. But now, with the uniform on, the future seemed closer, real. No longer invisible, no longer afraid, she was stepping into a life where she could heal, protect, and lead again. Her journey was only just beginning.